So what could possibly have made me cranky about Avengers Endgame? Well, I'd love to tell you, but like with Infinity War, anything I say about the movie could be considered some kind of spoiler, which is what made me cranky about reviewing Infinity War last year. So this time, I decided I would just wait until after opening weekend to do this review, so that I can talk about the movie itself, rather than just speaking in the most vague, generalized terms I could come up with. Not that I have any intention of spoiling the movie for you, but I know I wanted to go in completely blind, and I'd like to give people the same courtesy. It's not like any of us critic types were going to change anyone's mind about going to see Endgame anyway. In any case, for those of you unlucky few who haven't had a chance to see it yet, I'll just say I do think Endgame is a satisfying conclusion to the last 10 years or so of Marvel movies. It's a little darker than your average Marvel flick, both literally and figuratively, but it's filled with more fan service than you can possibly imagine. Not that anyone needed any more hype for this movie than they already had. So despite the things that I'm going to talk about in a minute here, I have no reason to dissuade you from paying full price to see Endgame. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, and I really hope you enjoy it, at least as much as I did. That being said, I did have some problems with it, and they do involve more specifics, so if you don't want to know anything about what happens in Endgame, now's your chance to leave before you hear something that you don't think you want to know before you go to see it. Alright, so if you're still here, there are 3 major things that made me cranky about Endgame. The first thing is the bad aftertaste I got from this otherwise delicious meal, because while Endgame really does feel like it closes the book on the MCU, we know this isn't the end. Disney and Marvel are going to run this train into the ground and milk it for everything it's worth, and nobody can stop that. Watching Endgame's credits roll, I felt like I never needed to see another Marvel movie again. It was really over. The story's done. All of the stuff that I could ever have imagined getting to see, and some of the stuff I couldn't, they delivered to me on a silver platter. What more could I ask for? Sure, we've got the X-Men and the Fantastic Four finally coming home at some point, but they're just more people to stuff into an already packed frame, essentially diminishing returns as the risk gets higher and the rewards stay just about the same. So if a part of Endgame's job was to sell me on starting this whole journey all over again, it needed to show me something tantalizing about where we could possibly go after this to get me interested. Instead, all the seeds that they've sown about the future of the MCU seem to indicate we're going right down the woke path that the comics followed off a cliff. I mean, Captain Marvel had already been a pretty strong hint about that, but when even the Russos are willing to bring their climactic battle to a screeching halt just for some random, jarring, girl power moment that pales in comparison to all the awesome stuff women have been doing throughout the movie, it's pretty clear that future movies will not get the same level of care or thought to their creation that we've been lucky to get up until now. Now, like Star Wars and countless other franchises before it, we're going to have to make sure that the political messages we want to send don't get mucked up by things like good stories. We're going to have to make sure to fill our diversity quotas, and if that comes at the expense of the characters or the plot, so be it. In that vein, supposedly they want Captain Marvel to be the foundation on which they build the next 10 years of movies, but she's just as bland and boring in this as she was in her movie. Only it's made even worse with all of these other better characters swarming around her. She's got zero chemistry with the rest of the team, and her appearance feels so forced that you could cut her out of the movie entirely, and the only thing that would change is the movie would be better for it. Hell, she just disappears for the bulk of the runtime anyway because they don't have anything for her to do, and she'd be too overpowered to just ignore her hanging around in the background. All she adds to the film are unnecessary complications and a couple of plot holes that might otherwise not be there. So if the future is characters shoehorned in like that because people say we don't have enough of Identity Group X, it's going to look a lot like that mess over at DC real fast. Speaking of messes, we've come to the second thing that makes me cranky about Avengers Endgame: time travel. Yeah, we all figured time travel would be involved in bringing the dead characters back, especially after the tease in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but there's a reason I didn't use it when I did my video on how I might go about undoing the snap. Even when it's done incredibly well, it creates problems. There's just too many ways for it to go wrong, and not that many ways for it to go right. Granted, I didn't think about how much fan service you can pack into a movie when you can revisit the other movies in the franchise like this, but the more I think about the movie, the more it starts to come apart because between time travel and Infinity Stones, you just have too many variables. Endgame makes it worse by trying to have their cake and eat it too, rather than adhering to any one set of rules. At first, they're going with the multiverse theory, wherein any changes to the past just make new timelines. So you can basically do whatever you want, but you can't reverse anything that actually happened to you already. That's great, in that it fully cements the consequences of the snap for our characters, and I'm really glad the Russos are willing to keep that intact. But then there is no issue with mucking up the timeline, and that would make the time heist, as they call it, much too easy, since getting caught doing it really doesn't matter. So then they decide that creating new timelines is probably really bad, and so they're going to try and minimize any changes they make to the timeline, even though it really shouldn't affect them. And at first, that's really great too, because it seems like they're going to switch to a predestination theory of time travel, where everything done in the past already happened and we just didn't see it. So we get some great moments that look like they fit right into the gaps of existing movies, Back to the Future 2 style. And that's really fun. But then they throw out that too. By the end of the film, there are just massive changes to the past, and they just up and forget about all the requirements that supposedly meant the Avengers only had one shot at this in the first place. Oh, and there's a strong hint at the end that there is in fact only one timeline, so it should really be seriously broken now that all of those other changes have happened. One of the biggest ones involves Thanos himself, and that brings us to the third thing that made me cranky about Endgame, what they did to Thanos. Infinity War is so good because they made Thanos a complex and interesting character. He's not just some big purple guy who wants to kill people because he's evil. He's essentially the protagonist of that story on a mirror universe version of the hero's journey. By the time Endgame hits its final stride, though, he's just the same monologuing evil alien you'd expect from pretty much any other movie. And that's just super disappointing. There's no more philosophical discussion to be had, no more nuanced thought to him, other than he's the bad guy who wants to do the bad thing, so let's fight! And what a fight it is, lest you think that my griping means I hated this movie. I may not have liked the overall package as much as Infinity War, but it's still a hell of a ride. And as I said, it's an incredibly satisfying conclusion to a very long 10 years. It truly does feel like the end of an era. Every bit of Marvel's best is on display here, from the de-aging tech, to the wit and humor people have at once exalted and derided, to the incredibly powerful tracking shots showcasing numerous heroes all together doing their thing, to the wonderful banter and charisma all these great actors bring to the table. It's just fun. The kind of fun that's kept people coming back despite weak outings like the Incredible Hulk, or crap villains like the Dark Elves, and crazy concepts like the Guardians of the Galaxy. And while we've had years of people arguing that these movies don't have especially memorable musical motifs, bet you remember the Avengers theme now, don't ya? And Alan Silvestri brings it all home in the biggest moment the MCU may ever have, absolutely masterfully. For the cherry on top, I even got the bonus of watching the first minutes of the movie unfold almost exactly like I had written in my video. So I got to sit there, all excited, thinking that there was actually an outside chance that it could end my way too, and I would be the one guy that predicted the whole movie. Obviously they went with time travel instead. But even some of my consequences made it into the finale, so that was especially fun for me. Ultimately, Avengers Endgame is a triumph. It's among the best series finales we've ever had. It's just a pity that we'll soon have to sit through the spin-offs, made-for-TV movies, and eventual reboot, because stopping here is not an option. I know I'll watch some of them, both because I enjoy doing these reviews, and because I might just be interested in certain characters, but I think I'm done as far as feeling compelled to keep up with the MCU from now on. It's been a wild ride, though, and kudos to everybody who's been involved in making it work for so many years now. So that's what I thought about Avengers Endgame. You can let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like. And if you'd like to get more reviews from me, subscribing is a snap. Just hit the button. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.